the main camera and get as close as you can, and then crop. Actually worse.
As MKBHD said,
It's often actually worse than if you just use the main camera and get as close as you can, and then crop in.
But the worst part of the whole thing is that the companies putting these lenses onto their phones must know that. So this is almost as bad as grabbing your phone, getting a permanent marker, and just drawing a bunch of fake lenses on the back. Because macro cameras, you can get great macro cameras resolution, that won't be one of them. So 5 out of 10 fail rating. Because of A, how surprisingly prevalent this is, and also how anti-consumer it is. Alright, the general rule with smartphones is, and also how anti-consumer it is. Alright, the general rule, how surprisingly prevalent this is, and also how consumer it is. Alright, the general rule with smartphones is, of an already really well-rounded phone, then cool, that can be a really good way to differentiate. Comes at the cost, then cool, that can be a really good way to differentiate yourself. But if a really well-rounded phone, then cool, that can be a really good way to differentiate yourself. But if that gimmick comes at the cost of other crucial functions, it's probably a no-go. And this is pretty much what happened with the Samsung Galaxy Beam. Samsung made a phone with a built-in projector, and you can see why this is cool. It's kind of like how modern phones can cast their screens onto a nearby TV, but with that phone you could do it anywhere, on any surface. But the problem is that having a projector built into your phone is very much a pro feature. It's something that enthusiasts would be willing to pay more for. But no pro is going to want a phone that's had to have every other component inside of it sacrificed because of this projector. The Beam was spec'd like a phone that was already 2 to 3 years old on release. So understandably, no one bought one. 5 out of 10 fail, quite a big miscalculation from a company like Samsung. Now, speaking of Samsung, a lot of people think that Samsung were the first to make a phablet with their Galaxy Note. Supposedly the first smartphone that was a huge jump in size above the rest. But I would argue that Dell beat them to it. The Dell Streak 5 was a 5-inch tablet phone, which obviously sounds ridiculous. 5 inches on a phone today seems micro, but this was 2010, when most phones were closer to 3.5 inches. And this was genuinely like the Galaxy S20 Ultra of 2010. The spec sheet was monstrous. The Dell Streak 5 was genuinely as exciting as it was surprising, and that's what makes its failure all the more of a shame. And I'd say that there's 2 reasons. One, that being this big back in 2010 naturally made it a niche product. And 2, that frankly, Dell tried to be a software company, but they're not one. They built a software skin just for their tried to be a 2010 naturally made it a niche product. And 2, that frankly, Dell tried to be a software company, but they're not one. They built a software skin just for their Streak devices to try and take advantage of these massive displays, but honestly, it just made everything fiddly and pretty ugly. A lot of the icons were tiny little things that were hard to click, and they didn't even leave spare room to show the time when holding the phone in portrait. Also, it was running on Android 1.6 when it came out, which was 3 major Android versions behind its time. It's a bit like a brand new Android 1.6 when it came out, which was 3 major Android versions behind its time. It's a bit like a brand new Android phone coming out today, running Android 8.0. Except, it was worse back then because each new Android version brought massive changes. Being on version 1.6, you didn't have access to the Facebook app, you didn't have any Flash support, and just crucial things like multi-touch support weren't available. The Streak was the beginning of the end for Dell smartphones. Massive shame. It would have been so cool to see what Dell could have done in today's market. So, again, 5 out of 10 fail for this one. Okay, now's where things get So back in 2013, a Russian company called Yota Devices came out with something that raised a few eyebrows. The Yota phone, display on the front, and a paper e-ink display on the back. Now in theory, this is a hit, because all of a sudden all your reading can be done on a display that A, is perfect for reading, a bit like a Kindle's display if you've ever used one of those, and B, one that barely uses any power. The irony, though, was that in order to fit these 2 displays, they had to massively shrink the battery capacity to just 1,800 mAh. This is the main purpose of that second screen. But Yota Phone 2 and a Yota Phone 3, which fixed a lot of these problems, but just ultimately was a niche perk. But it gets so much worse for this company, because the Yota company made an agreement with their supplier that they were going to order a large amount of units. Which makes sense, if a supplier that you're going to order a lot of phones, they did. But see, the Yota company quickly realized that they weren't going to submit, so they very quickly tried to go back on it, but ended up getting sued for $126